There's a strange experience that I don't think enough people talk about. It's the feeling of being surrounded by people you genuinely like, people who have never done anything wrong to you, and yet somehow you still feel completely disconnected from them. You are laughing at the same jokes, taking part in the same conversations, nodding at the right moments, even saying the right things, but internally it feels like you're standing behind a sheet of glass. You can see everyone else clearly, hear the rhythm of the room, but you can't quite reach it. It's like being in a warm house while still somehow standing outside in the cold. For a long time, I thought that feeling meant there was something wrong with me. Maybe I was too introverted. Maybe I was socially awkward. Maybe I was just overthinking everything, as people love to say when they don't know what else to call discomfort. But the older I have become, and the more psychology and philosophy I have read, the less convinced I am that alienation is always a pathology. Sometimes it isn't a malfunction at all. Sometimes it's a signal. Sometimes it's the beginning of becoming who you truly are. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." It's a beautiful quote, but people rarely talk about what it actually costs. Jung wasn't describing a comfortable process, he was describing something closer to a slow unraveling. Becoming yourself doesn't usually begin with confidence, it begins with confusion. It begins with noticing contradictions you can no longer ignore. It begins with discovering that the identity you have been performing for years doesn't quite fit anymore, like, clothes you've outgrown but kept wearing out of habit. And once you notice that, you start noticing something else. You realize that most of social life runs on unspoken agreements. We all know how we are expected to behave at work. We know which opinions are safe at family dinners and which ones quietly change the temperature of the room. We know when we are supposed to laugh, when we're supposed to nod, when we're supposed to say, yeah, totally, even if we only half mean it, and when it's probably better to keep quiet and let the moment pass. None of this is malicious. Society couldn't function if every interaction became an existential debate. Imagine trying to buy, a loaf of bread if the cashier suddenly wanted to discuss whether free will exists or whether your desire for sourdough is socially constructed. We'd never get anything done, right? The point isn't that people are fake, it's that human beings need scripts. Scripts reduce complexity. They allow millions of strangers to cooperate without always renegotiating reality from scratch. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent much of his career explaining that the brain is fundamentally lazy, not in the insulting sense, but in the energetic sense. It prefers mental shortcuts because thinking deeply about every decision would exhaust us. He called this cognitive ease. The familiar feels true simply because it's familiar. As Kahneman put it, a reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition, because familiarity is not easily distinguished from truth. Most people are perfectly happy living inside those scripts because they work. They pay the bills, maintain relationships, raise children, and create stable communities. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, civilization depends on it. As Nietzsche observed in Beyond Good and Evil, madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule. He wasn't condemning society so much as pointing out how easily collective agreement can become its own kind of gravity, pulling everyone into the same shape of thought. But then there are people who can't stop noticing the script itself. The way conversations follow patterns, the way certain opinions are rewarded with approval and others are met with silence, the way people often aren't responding to you, but to the role you are occupying. The funny one, the serious one, the optimist, the problem solver, the quiet one. Once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Even casual interactions start to feel like scenes in a play where everyone has rehearsed their lines so well they have forgotten there was ever a script at all. And that's where life starts to become complicated. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that the individual has always had to struggle to avoid being overwhelmed by the crowd. I don't think he meant that crowds are stupid. I think he meant that groups naturally reward agreement over originality. Belonging has always been more valuable than questioning because for most of human history, belonging kept you alive. To be excluded from the group once meant exposure, starvation, danger. So we evolved not just to seek belonging, but to fear its loss. The problem is that once you've developed the habit of questioning things, you don't get to choose where it stops. It doesn't only apply to politics or religion or big philosophical ideas. It starts leaking into everything: friendships, careers, relationships, even your own personality. You begin asking uncomfortable questions like, do I actually believe this, or have I simply repeated it so many times that it feels like mine? Or am I expressing myself, or am I performing a version of myself that gets the best reactions? Those questions don't make you superior, they make you observant. And sometimes they make you lonely because there is a very specific kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being slightly out of sync. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like you are translating yourself in real time, always adjusting your language so it fits the room. You start to realize that most conversations aren't about truth seeking at all. They are about alignment, reassurance, and maintaining a shared emotional temperature. As Albert Camus wrote, the absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world. In a smaller, quieter way, that same absurdity can appear in everyday life. The mismatch between what you notice and what others seem content not to question. And yet, even this isn't a tragedy in the simple sense, because once you see the script, you also gain something else: the ability to choose when to follow it and when to step outside it. You begin to realize that being true isn't about rejecting society entirely, but about no longer confusing participation with identity. You can still laugh at the jokes, you can still show up, you can still belong, but somewhere underneath it all, there is a quieter awareness forming. The awareness that you are not just a character in the room, but also the one noticing the room itself. And that, of course, changes everything.